wonderful world of Disney.
Fleisch, the teenage otter.
Ever since the frontier wilderness was turned under by the pioneer's plow, the wild animals of America have been looking for another home, but they've never been able to find it. And so they've had to settle for what was left. A patch of forest in the middle of a farm, a stretch of stream in some rocky place not worth cultivating. But if the animals have been surrounded, they haven't surrendered. In spite of man, they survive. And quite often, with the help of man, they thrive. Good game laws, restricted hunting seasons are some of the reasons. But this is probably the best reason, the wildlife sanctuary. In these protected areas, the animals can live out their natural lives with nothing to bother them, except each other. This particular sanctuary was located in the rich green lake country of the Middle West. It covered about 10 square miles of field and forest, and more than 100 different species of animals made their residence here. But once, for a little while, man had lived here too, and in the very heart of the sanctuary, he had left a monument to mark his passing, the crumbling remains of an old grist mill. The mill pond had long since become the center of a complex animal society. In spring, the waterfowl came to nest and rear their young. A colony of muskrats had settled here, too. Most of the animals lived in mutual tolerance, but there were predators too. The vixen had 5 cubs to feed, and she was forever on the prowl. The reeds along the shore had offered nothing, but now a vagrant scent brought her over a rise of ground to the foundations of the mill. Otter pups, just a few weeks old. For the fox, fair game. What the fox didn't see was Lutra, the mother otter, but she'd seen the fox and knew her pups were in danger. Behind the mill wheel, there was another entrance to the den. In defense of its young, the otter is a deadly fighter. The fox knew she was outmatched. Lutra, like all otters, was devoted to her family, and her litter was typical. 2 pups, Flash, the male, Fleeta, the female. So far, they'd seen only one of their parents. Until they were older, their father had been banished from the den. The father's name was Gray Muzzle. Although he was near the end of his prime, he would never lose his love of play, and so he was quite unhappy in his temporary exile. And he was forever calling for his mate to come out and join him in a frolic. So Lutra was on a constant shuttle, answering the demands of motherhood, responding to the pleas of her mate. This water world was the otter's playground. Here, in graceful, flowing symmetry, they played their games of tag, follow the leader, seek and find. Quite often, the Otters included in their game another player, a wise old carp, whose home and castle was the boiler of a discarded donkey engine. He never forgot that he was not only it, he was edible. Finally, with his castle under siege, the carp joined a passing school of minnows, an old trick, losing yourself in the crowd. With the game over, Lutra hurried back to her pups. Gray Muzzle wanted very much to follow, but he knew instinctively he must wait just a little longer. The last few weeks of spring passed quickly into summer. Flash and Fleeta were having their first glimpse of the outside world. For Fleeta, a glimpse was enough, but Flash was ready for adventure. And the pine squirrel seemed to show the way. He lost the squirrel in no time, but he found something even better. The old mill, a made-to-order funhouse for baby otters. But like any funhouse, there was something here to scare you. The fox wasn't playing games. This was business, and Flash knew it. He was cornered, but safe. The fox couldn't dig him out. The pine squirrel's alarm caught Lutra on the far side of the pond. Flash made a mistake. He ran. This time, it wasn't Mother that saved him. It was the old grain hoist. When Lutra arrived, Flash had already forgotten his moment of terror and was ready to play. But his mother had other plans. If her pup was old enough to leave the den, he was old enough to swim. Might as well start now. As a swimming instructor, Lutra's methods were direct but effective. Fleeta wasn't enjoying this at all. She knew she'd be next. By now, Lutra had worked Flash into deep water. She held him up for a moment, then she left him. The lesson was over. Flash could swim. He was filled with a wild excitement. He'd never known anything like this before. It was a whole new world with a mirror in the ceiling and everything upside down. A wonderland waiting to be explored. was altogether a marvelous adventure. Almost too much that left Flash quite literally going in circles. Three weeks passed. It was midsummer. The youngsters were strong swimmers now. It was time to leave the mill pond. To begin the Odyssey, the grand tour. This nomadic urge is the strongest driving force in the Otter's lives. Each year they follow a great circle. In summer they move downstream until they reach a wintering ground. Then in spring they return by another route to the place where they were born. Each Otter family has its own exact itinerary, and down through the generations it never changes. For Flash and his family, the grand tour began as a joyous adventure. But in the months to come, the Otters would travel more than 100 miles, far beyond the protection of their sanctuary. In the outside world, Flash would find that life can be a very serious matter. Right now, though, it was more like a traveling circus. Gray Muzzle, as the patriarch, always led the parade. Quite often, he would take a shortcut through the forest to reach another stream. Of course, Gray Muzzle had made the grand tour many times before, and he was familiar with all the way stations and stopping places. One of these was an abandoned reservoir. As usual, everything looked calm and quiet. So the family started hunting for crayfish, their favorite food. All but Flash. First, he must feed his curiosity. Kind of a funny-looking tree, but just the right size for a pup to climb. The view from the top was excellent. Upstream, all was calm. Down below, the racing spillway looked just a little dangerous. But not half as bad as that thing there. Flash's call for help found Gray Muzzle on one shore, Lutra on the other, but they both came on the run. It looked like an easy meal, but how to get at it? Intent on the problem, the bobcat didn't realize he was surrounded. Trapped between the two otters, there was only one way out. They'd solved the cat problem all right, but this was something else. How to get the pup down? Well, he'd just have to figure it out for himself. Flash made a good try, but came up with the wrong answer. A half-mile downstream, the pup found slack water and the shore. For the first time, his call for help went unanswered. Then instinct took over, the inborn urge of the Odyssey, the compulsion to keep moving downstream. Of course, he couldn't realize that he was leaving his family farther and farther behind. For the next 2 days, Flash hardly paused for rest. He lived in a nightmare of loneliness. On the 3rd day, he caught a scent on the breeze. The scent was familiar, but strangely different. A trap set last season and forgotten had claimed a victim, a female otter in her prime. But if Flash found death here, he also found life. This was Tina, the otter's pup. She was just Flash's age. Because she was frightened and lonely, Tina came forward eagerly. Here were 2 of a kind, and in the joy of their new companionship, fear and loneliness faded away. From now on, they would continue their odyssey together. It was just a little way downstream that they made an amazing discovery. There were other youngsters in the world besides otters. Raccoons are born acrobats, and they're always at their best with an audience. After the show, it was time to come down and get acquainted. Now, whenever there was a local get-together, there was one little fellow who always tried to join the fun. But as usual, the minute he showed up, somebody made a motion to adjourn. It didn't take long for Flash to get the message, too. Something in the air told him it was time to move on. Now they were in farm country, and here they learned that young domestic animals were just as friendly as their wild kindred. It was a casual meeting. As far as the kids were concerned, there was nothing unusual about an otter. But this was a dancing otter. Well, now, he was different. After the performance, it was time to get acquainted. But it always happens. Just when youngsters are beginning to have a little fun, grown-ups have to spoil it. The old nanny didn't want her kids playing with strangers. had just avoided a small crisis, now they created a minor catastrophe.
Whoa, Pete! Whoa, Pete! Hey! I told you, whoa! Where you going? Where do you think you're going now?
For the next 3 weeks, instinct led Flash along the same secret trail his family had followed for generations, and Tina never left his side. Now the youngsters had reached the midpoint in the long arc of the Grand Tour, a place called the Great Bay. They'd never seen so much water in their lives, and they reveled in it. Flash didn't know what that thing was out there, but anything new sparked his curiosity.
Quiet down, pup.
Bill Slocum was a fisherman by summer, a trapper by winter. He knew he'd really made a haul. A prime otter pelt was worth $40.
Well, the fishing ought to be this good all the time.
Stunned by shock and terror, Flash could understand only that he was being taken away from Tina, farther and farther away. Confined in a chicken coop prison, Flash would have a stay of execution for a few months.
Get back in there, you.
An otter's pelt brings top price when it's primed out for winter. In the meantime, Slocum would keep him well fed and healthy. The weeks passed. It was late autumn. By now, Flash had established a sort of distant friendship with the pup. He would have been friendly to the man, too, given half a chance. But Slocum wasn't interested in a pet, only a pelt. And so, cut off from any close companionship, Flash's wild heart never lost its yearning for freedom, and he thought he'd found a way. He was to have a helper in this project. It was all for nothing. The chicken wire had been buried deep in the ground to keep out predators. A change of seasons, but no change of heart. For of course, to the man, there was no sentiment here. This was business. Flash was just a piece of merchandise to be disposed of at the most profitable time. That time was now. then, at the last possible moment, a turn of fate. A deer in the right place at the right time.
Hush up. You stay here and be quiet.
In his freedom regained, Flash was filled with a wild joy he'd never known before. Deep snow was new to him, and he loved the cool, crisp feel of it. Playing toboggan came naturally. All otters travel like this in winter. This exercise was beginning to make Flash hungry. The icicles eased his thirst, but not his appetite. He knew he must find a lake or a stream. Where there was water, there would be fish. A beaver pond, long abandoned by its original owner. Flash sensed there was water right underfoot, but how to get at it? Then, a clue. It was the spillway, kept open by fast water through the winter. Flash was back in his element now, and there were fish here, all right. But what happens when you run out of air? Flash knew the answer by instinct. An otter can replenish its air supply from bubbles trapped under the ice. Otters don't eat underwater, but this was no problem either. Flash found the entrance to the empty beaver lodge. Perfect, a made-to-order dining room. In the outside world, living wasn't nearly as easy. Game was scarce, and the bobcat was always on patrol. He knew the beaver lodge had been empty for months, but now, from the vent hole, he caught a fresh scent. The bobcat just couldn't figure it out. But if that was a beaver, from now on he'd stick to rabbits. And so Flash had found everything he needed: a warm, dry home and plenty of food outside. An ideal place to spend the winter. It was nature's whim that just a quarter of a mile upstream, another otter, lonely and forlorn, had also found a winter home. It was Tina. When the spring thaw came, the restless ice revived in Flash a dormant instinct. And in a few days, when the ice moved out, Flash moved with it to complete his odyssey. He followed the brooklet until it joined a larger stream. Here he found a scent, strangely exciting, somehow familiar. It led him to Tina's den, but she had already gone. He searched for another clue and picked up her trail. It was fresh. She wasn't far ahead. For several hours, Flash moved steadily upstream. Sometimes he lost Tina's scent, but then he would always find it again on the rocks along the shore. He was getting closer now. He sensed it. Closer to Tina, but much too close to the one area that older, wiser otters always avoided. A danger zone, occupied by man. Flash was young and inexperienced. He knew only that he must find the little female, and now he did. Tina had stopped to look for crayfish, but now she found something much more interesting. The fisherman thought he'd hooked a whopper for sure. Then he saw what he really had.
Hey, Charlie, I hooked an otter.
Flash knew Tina was in trouble, and he wanted to help. An otter's worst enemy, the gamekeeper, hired to kill any threat to the angler's sport.
I'll get him.
It was a clean miss, but Flash made a mistake. He had a chance in the water. Instead, he headed for the shore.
Come on, you hounds, let's get him.
In the excitement, Tina broke free and got away. In his panic, Flash didn't even see the cows, but they saw him. He seemed to be after their calves, and this called for action. It was a stiff jolt, but it helped Flash on his way, and he gained another advantage. He left the cow in just the right mood for the next contingent.
Rip, Spike, come on this way.
The gamekeeper knew the otter would double back, head for the stream. And sure enough, the dogs picked up his trail again.
Here, let me see one.
The debris had saved his life.
Go on over there now.
The other end of the culvert, and the only way to escape. Sealed off now by the dogs. The gamekeeper had come up with an old trick. Make a cofferdam, build up a good head of water, then flush the varmint out. The dogs made it to the main stream first. And when Flash appeared, they were ready. Against two well-trained dogs, one otter has little chance. But Flash got in a lucky nip and cut the odds against him by half. The second dog was tough, really tough, and he knew all the tricks. The dog outweighed Flash 5-1, but raw courage can tip any balance. And all at once, it was over.
Well, he sure took your measure, didn't he? You ought to be real proud of yourself.
In his short life, Flash had faced all the worst that man could throw against him. Surely now his ordeal must be over. Nothing more could happen to him. But it did. When predatory animals invade privately owned hunting and fishing grounds, there are two ways to control them. The gamekeeper uses dogs and a gun. But the wildlife bureaus, the fish and game departments, have a better method. They simply live trap the animal and carry it to the nearest wildlife sanctuary. The traps are carefully constructed to prevent injury to the animal. And Flash could sense that this was one man that meant him no harm. As far as the sanctuary was concerned, there was only one in this area. It had to be the right one. Within the little Otter, the call of the Odyssey was stilled. Flash was home. Even the old carp came out to say hello. But he sensed there should be others here, others like himself. Better find a place where he could look around. Of course, there they were. Gray Muzzle, Lutra, Fleeta, and best of all, Tina had found her way here, too. When the Otters saw that the prodigal had returned, they formed a welcoming committee. It didn't take long for the homecoming party to turn into a real jumping affair. Even the old wheel did a little rocking on its own. The mill race just kept rolling along. And what with all the rocking and the rolling, the family reunion just naturally took off and went into orbit. Well, a lot of teenage romances have started on a Ferris wheel. But for Flash and Tina, this was the beginning of a lifelong partnership. Perhaps in the future they would face hazard and hardship again. But at a time like this, who cares about the future? Certainly not the Otters. The joyous, fun-loving, carefree Otters, the happiest animals in nature.